All right. So my name is Corey Sweet, and I am the Policy Systems and Environmental Change Specialist for our tencep programs. And we have several speakers today, and I just want to take a moment to introduce them. So we have Dr. Karen Frank and Chantal Rose, who are part of our evaluation team with tencep, and they'll be talking a little bit today. We will be featuring Garden from Gibson County, and Laquita Clark and Barbara Berry will be talking on a video today, and they'll be available to answer questions if you have them. We also have a Master Gardener on the call with us. Mr. Seth Whitehouse will be talking to us about partnering with Master Gardeners, and I think I saw him. I think everyone's here, so that's good. So before we jump into gardens, I want to talk to you about Monday Meetups. So I want to introduce this idea, and really what these are meant to be are a space to talk about the community work that's being done beyond tencep direct education. And these are going to be focused on nutrition and physical activity supports for direct ed, so policy systems and environmental change topics. Obviously, today is gardens. They're really meant to provide a platform for sharing projects and questions, information on tencep allowable funds and resources. We'll talk about that each time if they're available. Again, these are just meant to offer these resources listed here. What they are not meant to be is really an all-inclusive how-to training for each of these. So it's really about getting you the information and resources you need so that you have an opportunity to get involved in one of these projects. If you have that opportunity, that you're prepared to do so. So we have, obviously today we're talking about gardens. And our next Monday meetup, next month we will be talking about walking initiatives. So we have our colleague Belinda Riddle talking about her storybook trail. And we also have Cameron Taylor from the Tennessee Department of Health talking to us about his role as a healthy development coordinator. So he's going to focus on partnerships for walking initiatives, but it would be really great to tune in to hear from him, even if you're not so interested in walking initiatives, because the health department provides these regional healthy development coordinators, and they're really here to assist with a lot of different types of PSC work. The next few, I have some great ideas in mind, but I also want to hear from you as well. So those are kind of to be determined. Today, we're going to be talking about how community gardens fit with tencep initiatives, the why, the where, and the how. We're going to talk a little bit about what to think about before starting a community garden. We're going to hear from Gibson County Garden, as we mentioned, Seth Whitehouse, and then also our evaluation team demonstrating impact. And then I have a feedback survey for you all to get a little more information. So why are we talking about community gardens with tencep? Well, our guidance cites food gardens as a beneficial activity that leads to the economical production and consumption of healthy, fresh food. So really this happens because gardens are increasing access and exposure to fresh produce for our participants. They also connect really well with our nutrition education programs, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Gardens also offer many community benefits. One extra bonus right now is that they're an outdoor activity, so they can allow for some social distancing. In addition to some of these other benefits, they beautify community spaces, and they've been known to strengthen social connections, which I think we could all use right now. And then where can tencep support gardens? Well, if you are working with tencep programs, you know that they need to be in a qualifying census or block group, so that if you have questions about where that is in your county, you can look into your 2019 county folders. Gardens and schools have an additional qualifying criteria or an an extra qualifying option that if they're not in a qualifying census tract, if they do have 50% of students that receive free or reduced lunch, they can also qualify. So some great sites for community gardens to help reach our participants would be senior centers, housing complexes, food pantries, or faith-based sites. And those sites are really great because they can help connect the gardens back to our participants. All right, so this is going to be kind of a hefty slide. How can agents and PAs work with gardens? So before we talk about your role with gardens, I just want to point out something I do plan on kind of pointing out at each meeting. So you can play many roles in PSE work. You do not have to be the main leadership role in PSE activities we discuss here. Really, when working with a community site, someone at the partnering site would likely have the leadership role. So for instance, if you're involved with a garden at a senior center, a staff member at that site could be in charge of leading and coordinating that garden, while you might help with some of the initial planning process, helping to connect the site to resources, helping them think through sustainability. So introducing these PSE ideas is really not meant to make you feel like you need to go out and take on each and every project alone. PSE's work is always done with partners. So for one project, you might just be complementing the PSE effort with nutrition education. And for another project, you might really be more involved in helping the partner coordinate the effort. So again, ultimately, these ideas are meant to offer you familiarity and guidance if any of these projects present themselves as opportunities in your county, and if there's something that you want to get involved with. So one role you can play is assist sites with planning and coordination. And you can play a role in the initial planning of meetings and coordinating stakeholders and volunteers. So this can be for new gardens or existing gardens. You can also assist the sites in cultivation of food and garden maintenance. So yes, there can be some site staff time dedicated to this type of work. However, keep in mind that this should not be your main role in the garden. To really improve sustainability, the maintenance of the garden should be a group effort, and it should include site staff, community workers, or volunteers. You can also assist sites in the distribution of produce, help sites develop a distribution plan. So this should be really done before the garden actually gets started. And this can be an important way for you to help the site connect healthy produce to people. So really this piece is about asking questions about what the plan is for the site to use the garden produce. So is it going to use it for taste testings? Will it be donated to a local food pantry? Will it be distributed to participants on site? So having a plan in place for this will help the garden define a purpose, okay? So beyond just helping ask these questions, you can play a key role in encouraging the integration of produce into food services on site or connecting the community distribution sites. So this really takes things a step further. So establishing a garden is a really great environmental change, but when you start integrating that fresh, locally grown produce into the site's food service, it really becomes a systems change.
And last but not least, your role is going to always be to connect the garden back to nutrition education. So some complementary programs and resources we have are listed here. However, really any nutrition or healthy eating program is going to be complementary to a community garden because we're encouraging fruits and vegetables. So we have a lot of youth programs for gardening listed. That Grow It, Eat It, those adult handouts, those would be available on the Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go site. And I'm also going to connect them when I post this session. So as we're going through this, I also want to make a note about FNAP PAs garden participation because their main role is really directly connecting with the participant. So they can be involved in gardening efforts, but in some very specific ways. So number one is they can really be connecting that garden with the nutrition education. So they can lead that nutrition education piece like they always do. And then also our FNIP PAs, have a lot of really great community relationships because they teach classes at many of these sites. So they may be teaching nutrition education at a community site, and they find that they have a community garden or that could use additional support, or they're at a site that is interested in a new community garden, and that's when they can refer that site to their agent. Okay. All right. So how can tencep help? And one thing many of you may not know is that we do have allowable expenses that can be purchased through your supply budget. So seeds, starter plants, potting soil, fertilizer, and small gardening tools. I realize that small gardening tools sounds a little vague, and this comes straight from our guidance. So we are still learning about everything you can fit into this category. I will say Elizabeth Winchell from Knox County recently purchased gloves, hand trowels, and lockers, which are a little bit larger. They're still, a handheld tool, but they're a little bit larger. So please, if you think there's something that fits into these categories, go ahead and submit for it, and we can seek approval on our end. And this is going to help us be able to understand better what the more we kind of ask for items, and if they get approved or denied, it gives us a better understanding what we can purchase as well, since this is fairly new to us. Also, I want to make note, if you are from a small county and with a smaller supply budget, please don't let this deter you from gardening projects. Talk to us about your project, and we can see how we can make that work. All right. So now we're going to hear from your colleagues in Gibson County, Laquita Clark and Barbara Berry, in a video created by Chantal Rose. And as we go through the video explaining how they got their garden started, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed I can make it work, please listen for a few things that I think really contributed to the strength of their garden. So the first thing is how they got started reaching out to a really wide variety of partners. The second thing, the video talks about some really simple logistical things that help them stay organized and keep volunteers and stakeholders engaged. And it is talked about on more than one occasion in the video. They had a pretty clear vision of what the garden is and its purpose. I just wanted to point out a couple things before you get started thinking about your garden. We've got some questions in the chat, so I'll address those a little bit later. Making sure you engage stakeholders. These are some of the things that the Gibson County Garden did: find interested people and develop a planning group, identify resources. They talked about the importance of their master gardener, so we're going to hear about that. Developing a mission and a plan. So again, they had a clear mission and plan for that. So next, we are going to hear from Seth Whitehouse, who's the agricultural agent and master gardener coordinator for Anderson County community. And he's involved with various farmers markets and local associations with the county. And he's our master gardener to talk about some partnerships. So we will hear from him.
Thank you. Sorry about that, y'all. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about the Master Gardener program. I know we're all in extension here. We've probably, heard that term, but I just want to get a little bit more in depth with it. And so you guys know a little bit about the background of it. And while I go through this, keep in mind, all counties are unique, from rural to urban. So, ranging from the experience of Master Gardener Group, whether they just started, in the last year or two, or, they're a really strong core group that's, similar, Memphis, Nashville, or Knoxville area too. So just keep that in mind as we go through this, and we can adapt to your local area. So what Master Gardeners bring to the table. So in order to become a Master Gardener, each participant is trained with 40 hours, of topics that range from environmental stewardship, botany, all the way down to integrated pest management with insects, and it just ranges with many different topics. And then with that 40 hours of education, they are then supposed to return 40 hours of volunteer hours back into their local community. And then each year, so forth on, they will then continue providing 25 hours. So that's, a lot of hours that could potentially be given to our counties and that need projects like the ones that we've talked about in that past video. And so we're basically a volunteer program that services citizens through horticulture education. And all these master gardeners are unique, from their dedication, their passion. Many of them are retired folks that have a lot of time on their hands that are able to, bring back to the community. And a lot of them have a diverse, skill set. Some of them have never gardened in their life, and they've kind of learned on that volunteer program. And some of them, one example, person actually had a PhD in plant pathology. So the diverse skill set really carries on into this program and hopefully into our projects together. And of course, we can talk all about the qualitative impacts that the Master Gardener program really brings, from therapeutic horticulture, improving our community. Corey had mentioned, a lot of these, impacts, and we kind of have the same goal. And, a lot of these master gardeners will lead the effort with your assistance too. So I know in the video they mentioned a lot of the master gardeners were donating some of the supplies. That is very common, and something that we don't always depend on, but definitely master gardeners love to provide as well. And then we can always jump into the quantitative impacts, just to get a little frame of how our state is set with the Master Gardener program. And comparatively with the other states in the Southeast, Tennessee's a very large Master Gardener volunteer network with over 2,500 Master Gardeners. 40 out of the 95 county-based programs there. That's pretty strong, and over 200,000 volunteer hours annually. So hopefully that can be transitioned into some of our projects that might get in the future. To show that statewide again, this is a cool little image that shows all of our master gardeners per zip code. And you can really see, a lot of these master gardeners, even if they're not, located specifically in their county, they might live in a nearby county if that extension program, provides it. So you might be shocked to learn, even though your county doesn't have a master gardener program, you may or may not have master gardeners that are actually living within your county and could potentially, reach your community there too. And they would certainly eat that up for volunteer hours too. And a lot of times these master gardeners, we ask that they log their volunteer hours based on project and based on their travel. So that is something that, we gather that input too. And to, look at this even more down to the nitty gritty, just all the different food gardens, demonstration events, are some awesome qualitative impacts that the Master Gardener program can show year in and year out. So the critical elements. So again, it all starts with training and initially preparing these master gardeners to, just like that video said, extend another extension for our extension agents. They'll reach out to the community through volunteer service and hopefully teach in these different various projects, and continue on each year with more and more interns or master gardeners. And we have that same goal in mind of helping, Tennessee grow better communities, and those projects go hand in hand. So with every Master Gardener program, there's a Master Gardener coordinator like myself. And, usually once that Master Gardener group is set up, they have an association. Eventually they'll have a president, vice president, have the whole board set up on that association. And this will be a great time to, get to know, if you haven't already, get to know that group, and see, which motivated individuals might be able to help out, and potentially provide those opportunities for folks to gain volunteer hours. And some of those might lead to programs like Corey had mentioned, Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go. These photos are credited to our FCS agent in Anderson County. She does a great job and was able to take these pictures before I came on board of this program with the association. They had 2 master gardeners in Anderson County that actually helped teach the curriculum, and of course, master gardeners that did the preparation of the garden, help get that ready for the kiddos to come on in with this program. Just an example there to show you all. And so how you can kind of get the ball rolling. That video did a lot of my job for me right here, but is really just starting that conversation and brainstorming some potential project ideas with your agriculture agent, if you have a master gardener group in there, seeing if you can have a meeting with the president or any of the board members of that master gardener association, and just getting a feeling of what partners and what core group could really aid the most. Seeing what current projects are ongoing. Every master gardener group should have a list that they're able to report to of what projects they're currently reporting to. And if there's a potential project that could be implemented that kind of meets our tencep and what we're projects we're trying to implement, whether it's getting a new community garden in an area of the county that is kind of might be a food desert, or doesn't currently have a project implemented there, and just seeing if what projects the association might be leaning towards, and seeing if you can kind of piggyback on that as well. And so once you figure out those projects that might work, usually each project assigns a leader. And again, that doesn't mean you at all. You're just there to assist potentially and provide those resources. And they're the expertise to really head up that community garden and get it going. And some things that we've noticed, with groups, small and large, is it's all about keeping folks engaged. It's horrible to start a project, everyone's all excited, and then a year later, that garden, you're looking back at it and it's covered in weeds. Just definitely important to get that core group that will really take ownership of that project and that community garden. And so when you're building your team, keep that as a focus on that project. Start small, never get too big and not be able to upkeep it. You might need more hands on deck than you had anticipated. And that size in that video at Gibson County looked like a pretty good size to start off on as well, and seems manageable. And it's important to gather input from everyone. If some folks are wanting it in a different area just because of travel logistics, but it might be better in a community less served. We need to gather input and hear from all of our groups there. So just some tips to look forward if you're potentially thinking about some projects in your local area. And let's say you're watching this and you're saying, hey, I don't even have a master gardener group. This doesn't really fit me here, but you're really interested in gardening and thinking that this program will really cross over with reaching more contacts and participants. There are other resources to look into. The first one I wanted to say, just as far as curriculum and education, is of course the UT Hort website and the residential and consumer horticulture videos on YouTube. Excellent array from getting started with a vegetable garden. This publication, W877 Gardening Guide, it's not necessarily just for Tennessee teachers, but it was aimed at just getting started with just building and using raised beds, what to plant per school semester, what might work best, early fall or late fall or spring semester, because a lot of times these will be around the school areas as well. And just looking at in your local area, if you don't have a master gardener group, there are other gardening groups that you may or may not know are in your area. I was in Scott County before Anderson County. We had another gardening group called Grow Appalachia, and they did an excellent job at reaching underserved folks, and we were able to partner with them as well, even though they weren't, extension, they were still a gardening group that we could reach participants with too. And so that was a few of the resources I want to throw in here. Corey, I went just over my time there, so I'll leave it at this and stop sharing here.
Thank you so much, Seth. That was actually really helpful with a lot of really good information. Next, I'm going to switch back to our PowerPoint here. And we are going to hear from Chantal. She's going to talk to us about assessing and reporting garden impact. And Chantal, are you?
I'm here, yes. Can you hear me?
Excellent, yes.
Awesome. All right, as far as assessing and reporting community gardens, over the last several months, I'm new to the evaluation team with Dr. Karen Frank. I was hired last year in the midst of the pandemic, and but I've had the opportunity to meet with agents and PAs across the state, and something that keeps coming up is how in the heck are we supposed to evaluate our PSC work? And so this, assessing and reporting community gardens can really be applied, as a perspective for any policy system environmental work. In the work that we do, we teach recipes that have very explicit instructions. We've got the ingredient list, it's potentially numbered, it's a step-by-step process for manipulating those ingredients, starting in point A. There's some sort of time frame, and then you set the timer, and in 15 minutes, you've got muffins or a fruit parfait or some other healthy dish. So it's a very linear process. But with PSC work, you're working with really, really complex systems. So while, if you don't mind advancing the slide, Corey. Thanks. So while, following a recipe looks like the arrow on the left, it's a very start to finish process. Working in systems is messy. And it's going to take some time to get used to living in messy systems like that. But, and for those of you who don't know, a system is a group of interacting or interrelated entities that form a whole. You can think of a vehicle as one of those, where you've got, the gas and the starter and the tires. All of these parts really have to work together to create something. And that's really what, PSCs are, and especially with community gardens. It can be messy, it can be unpredictable. You'll start with a great plan, and then you have to be agile. You have to be able to adapt. And then evaluating that is even more difficult. Not just producing something can be challenging and require a lot of creativity, but then evaluating that can also be a little bit dicey. But in saying that, nobody has the one right answer or one right way of evaluating community gardens, but we can do our best. Let's go to the next slide. So I know there's a lot of fears about evaluation from some people. I don't know how to evaluate this. I don't have the time to evaluate. I'm afraid of the results. I hate numbers. I don't do numbers. But evaluating our work is really important, because evaluating our work determines, the value of what we are creating. But even before we can evaluate, we need to really track and monitor our progress, events and accomplishments and different things as part of the initiative. And so one of the things that I'm presenting for evaluating and monitoring community gardens and PSC work is simply just putting together a document where you can track the beginning of your initiative to the very end, every little activity that happens, anything that's associated with your community garden. Write it down, and you could call it journaling if you want to. You could, just have a Word document where you, date and say, hey, we had a meeting with this person, or we reached out to this person. But every time you monitor or record those activities, it helps you, one, further understand your initiative or the project that you're working on. It helps you understand, oh, on this date, we actually decided we couldn't do this and we adapted and changed and started doing this. You know, it can help you be able to reflect on the work that you're doing and, you know, secure additional funding and resources as you start saying, oh, these people are interested in this project. So, you know, in order to evaluate, we need to monitor and track the activity that we're doing. Next slide, please. And then, of course, you know, having said all of that, okay, so what do I track? What do I write down? The questions as an evaluator that I always go back to are, what's the who, what, when, where? You know, and before you start any journey or any project or any community garden, you know, just like Seth had mentioned, and it was mentioned in the video, you know, it's good to know where you've been before, kind of where you are presently and where you want to go. You know, I don't want to belabor the SMART acronym, but it's a good place to start writing down, you know, hey, we want to do a community garden. And then let's start writing down who we met with. What are our ideas? Just write all of those things down. And then as you start adapting and refining your plan, you have all of that recorded somewhere. Information can be collected by recording ideas, your plans, events on a regular basis. I always suggest weekly, because then you don't have to, you know, try to remember what happened 3 weeks ago. Just take the time to carefully gather your information. It does take a little bit of time up front, but honestly, it saves you so much more time once you get to the end of your project and you're like, wow, we actually have a garden. And even with the Gibson garden, there was so much effort that went into that, but we don't see that. You kind of see this empty plot of ground, and then you see this amazing garden. But the way that we can help you evaluate that is by recording your activities. Next slide, please. And here's just an example of some of the things that you can do. You know, so what do you invest in your project? You know, if your program or your project is a community garden and your goal is to increase your program participation and increase access to fresh vegetables for people in your community, you know, what are you investing your time? How much time are you spending on the project as an agent, or how many hours is your PA spending on the project? We can then turn around and from start to finish of an activity and be able to quantify those, and those are hours worked. You know, who's volunteering their time, their talents, their time, their money, you know, equipment. Write down and record what you invest. Write down and record what you do, whether it's meetings or marketing or, you know, building relationships. Those are all meaningful activities that take your time and effort. It's also really good to, you know, keep a list of people you reach out to. You know, I know the Gibson Garden folks, they reached out to, you know, probably several dozen entities and only heard back from a few, but at least they know, hey, we reached out to 10 and we got these 3, but at least we have a historical record of who we reached out to in the past, who's involved, any partners, participants, and then who you reach, you know, what food was produced and when, you know, what are the actual outputs? And again, for each of those, just ask, you know, who was it? It was, you know, our community partner, and what did they do? And when did they do it? What was the date? What was the time? How long did they spend there? Because we can quantify volunteer hours. And one of the things is that's important too is, I mean, all these things can be added to and included in your impact statements. So accurate and detailed data allows for more accurate and valuable evaluation, you know, and a thorough display of your results. And so whether it's, you know, quantifying volunteer hours, you know, have attendance sheets for people who come and work the garden or come and, you know, reap the produce. That way we can quantify, you know, who your audience was and the hours that were spent there. So as long as you write down those things, we can collect those inputs and then we can transform that data into meaningful insights, including economic impacts, you know, whether that's the quantity of money that was saved or cost savings based on the output of your garden. You know, the state evaluation team, we can transform that data into economic impacts. So you have support. Let's go to the next slide, please. The other thing that I like to talk about is, aside from asking those questions of who, what, when, where, how much, it's just addressing questions that are important to you, the members of your community, and those who are providing support, whether it's personnel, hours, financial, material, whatever it is. You know, everybody in systems and you know, collective impacts, there's always a lot of individuals who are interested in the outcome. And, going back to your planning stages, what was your intended purpose? And with the Gibson Garden, they had a pretty clear goal. They knew that they needed to provide fresh produce for those people who needed the access, and they were able to do that and more. And so then they can ask these questions about, what else is of interest to the people who participated. So I just encourage everybody to do their very best and be patient with themselves through these different projects. Just ask questions, track your progress, track your activities, and then know that you've got a support team here at the state evaluation team who can help you. If you've ever got questions or concerns or nightmares or anything that you have as you're going through this process, it is definitely challenging, but the reward is so great. And it's been such an honor to be able to see Miss Barbara and Miss Quita, struggle through all of their different challenges and be creative. And there's just the community effort that has really gone into that garden is tremendous. And so those are my suggestions for, assessing and evaluating your gardens. And if you ever have questions, we are always here to support you.
Thanks, Chantal. Appreciate that. All right. And then I believe Dr. Frank is going to be talking to us about reporting into super.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. It's a great topic, and so glad to have so many of you on the webinar today. So just some practical issues. Make sure that you're reporting what you're doing to super if you're doing any of this type of garden. Again, make sure you include your volunteer hours. So you all know that super is now giving you economic output for that. So it's always really important. And so many volunteer hours go into a garden. It's just a great way to show the impact that you're having. We do have an indicator that you can report these efforts to, and it's number of nutrition supports implemented in agencies and communities. And this is under the Plan and Prepare Healthy Diets topic. And just make sure you include all the activities that would go into a gardening effort that count as supports. So these could include the number of times the produce was distributed, the number of taste tests that you did with youth or adults, and even things like the number of packets of seeds that you distributed. So all of those could count as a separate support and would be important for you to reflect in your reporting. And then gardens, especially if you're the coordinator of the garden, these are a great impact statement because they are so comprehensive and have so much going on. And like Chantal said, making sure you're tracking how many partners, what was donated, and a dollar amount, as well as volunteer contributions, all show great impact and are a great thing to do if you're taking on these efforts. And again, if you have any questions about evaluation, make sure to get in touch with us.
Thank you, Karen. All right, so we are reaching the end here. I have one more slide, if it will flip to it, about some helpful resources. There we go. And these I will, once I post this, I will link these resources as well so that you have them available to you. And then now I just want to really open it up to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to check the chat and just see what we have here. So from Sarah, could seed packets and small tools be used as educational incentive? I think so, if they're within the below $5, but I have to check with the powers that be. So Is Meredith on or Dr. Ward?
I'm here, Corey.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, it might be something we need to check on, but I figured I'd hand that to you, Dr. Ward.
So the question is about incentives.
Could seed packets and small tools be used as educational incentives?
Yeah, I think I have to check that too. It definitely has to be under $5 and it has to be for the audience if it's tencep funded.
Okay. So we will think that through and let you all know. It would be great for you to create an online map for those who are interested in the community garden. An outline or map. Yeah, so of resources. So we're hoping to offer some more resources for community gardens, so we will keep you updated on that. All right, can I open it up to any questions, especially for our speakers today that came up? All right, well, I guess I would ask we had a few people on the call that have been involved in a community garden before. I'd like to ask if anyone has started a community garden, what barriers did you have to overcome? Do we have anyone interested in sharing things that were tricky with starting the garden?
Our coalition in Sevier County did a community garden with the food bank. And we did real well the first year, but then after that, the food bank had trouble getting volunteers to keep the garden going, so.
Yeah, volunteers is always a tricky one.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping them engaged, definitely.
Yes.
And I think you heard from Laquita too. She had that calendar, and I think she was sending those out pretty regularly to her volunteers to try and keep them on board with everything. I have a question for Seth, if you don't mind. You mentioned that it's pretty important to have that core group of people at the beginning to start the community garden. Can you give any guidance as to how many people you think really need to be really on board before starting a community garden? I'm assuming it's more than one person that you want to have, on the team, so one person's not doing all the work.
Yeah. So one example I have is when we were in Scott County with our Master Gardener Association there. One of the Master Gardeners worked heavily with the women's shelter there, and they had 2 abandoned beds that hadn't been touched for a few years. And she was very motivated to lead that project. So that one leader was very key getting ideas spread on that. And then she got about 3 other Master Gardeners that piggybacked on that and were able to, make a work day probably about once a week. And they were out there renovating those beds. So that was for 2 raised beds, and those 4 Master Gardeners did an excellent job at keeping those up. So yeah, I mean, just that one leader with a few, motivated ones that can stick to that project. I'd say about a core group of 3 or 4, and then it kind of spreads from there. Is what worked in my background for there.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, Corey, I'm going to jump in and piggyback on what Seth just said. I think that's one of the consistent themes that's I think has been said throughout in my experience with community projects is understand what you have around you, because there's somebody who's either tried the community garden or there's groups and organizations who are similarly motivated that you can find or create alignment with. Whether there's a local business in town who wants to try to be engaged in the community, see if we can't get a schedule and get them involved. Or there's a lot of assets within your community that you can start integrating and finding alignment with. So that's part of, setting your goals is, who do we have at the moment that we could try to find some alignment with and integrate them into the activity on a regular basis. Your communities have a lot of assets existing. We'd hate for you guys to have to recreate the wheel, as it were, and recreate something totally brand new. And some of you may be doing that, and we'll have picks and rocks for you to support you with, but in general, the community's got some incredible assets that you can request support from.
Definitely. Well, we have hit our time. So again, I thank you so much for joining us for our first Monday meetup, and I hope you will join us next month for our next Monday meetup walking initiative. So thank you all for being here, and I will send out a, if you don't mind, a survey link right after this. And also, once I get this uploaded, I will let you all know where it is. All right. Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it.